It was the dead of night. The forest slept under a heavy blanket of snow. The wind cut through the trees like knives, howling as if the earth itself was warning that something unnatural was moving in the shadows. Inside a small wooden cabin, far from the nearest village, a man named Daniel sat by the fire. He had chosen this lonely place to escape the noise of the world, to heal from old wounds that time refused to close. The crackling fire was his only companion, its orange glow fighting against the icy darkness outside. But that night, something broke the silence. At first, it was soft, almost like a cry carried on the wind. Daniel lifted his head. He thought it was his imagination, a trick of the storm. But then, again, he heard it. A faint, desperate sound, not human, not animal, something in between. Daniel stood slowly, heart pounding. He wrapped his coat tighter and stepped toward the door. As he opened it, the freezing air punched him in the chest. His eyes scanned the snow-covered ground, and then he saw her, a figure crouched low. Blue skin, marked with strange patterns that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Her hair was braided with beads and strings of something that shimmered like metal. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. An alien, weak, trembling, and clutching something in her arms. It was a baby. The child's skin was pale, its tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Its eyes barely opened, and the mother, her ribs showed under her thin skin, her body shivering violently. She looked up at Daniel with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't speak his language, but her meaning was clear. "Help us, or we die." Daniel froze. Every instinct told him to run back inside, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. This was beyond reason, beyond the world he knew. But something else, something deep inside, kept him rooted. He saw the way the mother's hands trembled, the way she bent over her child, as if shielding it from the entire universe. Slowly, Daniel stepped closer. The snow crunched under his boots. The alien mother hissed weakly, her body tense like a cornered animal. But she didn't move away. She couldn't. She had no strength left. Daniel knelt down, his breath misting in the icy air. He looked at the baby, then back at her. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered, even though she couldn't understand. "Come inside, both of you." The woman's eyes flickered toward the open cabin door. Warmth spilled out from within, like a promise. She hesitated, but then, with a strength born only of desperation, she pushed the basket holding her child toward him. Snow clung to the baby's blanket, frost beginning to settle on its delicate skin. Daniel reached out, lifting the basket into his arms. The weight was almost nothing. The baby barely stirred. When he looked back down, the mother had collapsed onto the snow. Inside the cabin, Daniel moved quickly. He set the baby near the fire, wrapping it in thick blankets. He poured warm water into a small cup and dipped a cloth to wipe the frost from its tiny face. The child let out a weak cry, a sound that pierced his chest deeper than any blade. Then he turned to the mother. She had crawled inside behind him, dragging her body across the floor. Her lips were blue, her skin icy to the touch. Without thinking, Daniel pulled more blankets and covered her. She tried to push them back toward her child, her lips forming broken sounds. He realized she didn't care if she lived. She only wanted the baby safe. "Not tonight," Daniel muttered, his jaw tight. "Neither of you are dying tonight." Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside, a fragile new reality took shape. The baby stirred. Feeding from a mix of broth and water, Daniel improvised. The mother drifted in and out of consciousness, her alien eyes watching him with suspicion, fear, and something else. Hope. Daniel's mind raced. Who were they? Where had they come from? Why had she chosen his cabin out of all places? None of it made sense. But he knew one thing for certain. They were alone, they were starving, and if he turned them away, they would not see another dawn. And so, he made his choice. Days turned into weeks. The snow outside deepened, isolating them from the world. Inside, the fire never went out. The alien mother regained her strength, though she still struggled to communicate. She spoke in strange tones, her voice melodic but sharp, filled with sounds Daniel could not replicate. Yet slowly, they began to understand each other, through gestures, expressions, and the shared language of survival. He learned her name, Sira. He learned the baby's name, Luma. And he learned their story, piece by piece. Sira's people were hunted, not by humans, but by others. Mercenaries, trackers, creatures Daniel could barely imagine. They saw her kind as prey, resources, trophies. She had fled across mountains and forests, carrying her child through endless nights, searching for safety. And somehow, fate had led her to him. But peace never lasts. One night, Daniel woke to the sound of crunching snow outside, not the random stirrings of the forest. This was deliberate, slow, heavy, footsteps. His blood ran cold. He reached for the rifle hanging by the door. Sira was already awake, clutching Luma to her chest. Her eyes were wide with terror. She whispered something rapidly, pointing toward the woods. And then, voices. Harsh, guttural, not human. The hunters had found them. The cabin shook as something massive slammed against the door. Daniel braced it, gritting his teeth. Shadows moved in the window. Dark, armored figures, taller than men, with glowing eyes and weapons that hissed with unnatural light. Sira cried out, holding Luma close. Daniel's heart pounded. He had no reason to fight for them. They weren't his family. They weren't even his kind. But when he looked at Sira, her fear, her desperation, something inside him hardened. Not again. Not tonight. Daniel threw open the door and fired. The crack of the rifle echoed like thunder, dropping one of the hunters into the snow. The others roared, advancing. The battle was chaos. Shouts, gunfire, flashes of light. Sira, though weak, fought too, unleashing a scream that sent ripples of energy through the air, staggering their attackers. It was survival, pure and brutal, and in the end, they won. The hunters fled into the storm, dragging their wounded. The cabin stood battered but unbroken. When silence returned, Daniel collapsed against the doorframe. His chest heaved, his hands trembling. Sira knelt beside him, her eyes shining with something he finally recognized. Trust. For the first time, she reached out, touching his hand, pressing it to Luma's tiny chest. A silent vow passed between them. This was not just her child anymore. It was theirs. The winter slowly gave way to spring. The snow melted. The forest breathed again. But the memory of that night never left Daniel. He knew danger would return. More hunters would come, perhaps even worse. But he also knew something else. He was no longer alone. In a world that had taken everything from him, fate had given him something new. A reason to fight. A reason to live. And so, as the first green leaves appeared on the trees, Daniel stood outside his cabin, rifle on his shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Sira stood tall, her child cradled against her chest. They were no longer strangers. They were family. And together, they would face whatever the universe dared to send.